Ladies and gentlemen, if I can again ask, can everybody who is in this session take their seats, please? We would like to begin with our final session of the Global Aviation Gender Summit. Thank you very much to the team for the ICC for quickly refreshing us as well. We do appreciate that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, when we began this maiden voyage, could I call it that, or at least this maiden flight, into the issues relating to gender equality and equity in the aviation industry, we had three objectives: to commit, to mobilize, and to act. And therefore, the outcomes of this particular session are about charting that roadmap for action. Certainly, we've seen a lot of mobilization from the different examples that have been presented to us from right the way around the world. And we've also heard a number of commitments being made, as well as seen various events, charters, as well as upcoming commitments, declarations being made that now project what gender equality will look like in the aviation sector in time to come. This final panel's task is a very simple but perhaps also a complex one at the same time. Charting a roadmap for action. How do we take intentional, calculated, and tactical steps to make sure that this was not just a summit, but this is, in fact, the platform from which great actions will spring forth? I'm now going to hand over to my final moderator for the day, Mr. Vincent Smith, who is the Director for the Bureau of Administration and Services at ICAO. Please give him and his panel a very warm round of applause.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and we're going to do this in three ways. It's a wrap-up session. The first thing we'll do is we'll go through the outcomes of the meeting, and I just want to thank all of my colleagues in ICAO and everyone else who has drawn this up very quickly. I hope it's an inclusive list, and please bear with us on that. Afterwards, then we'll have I'll be asking the panel members here some questions. Mainly, I'll be asking them how they see the meeting has gone, what key points they've taken away from it, and what they see as the challenges and the benefits from their perspective. I'll just introduce the panel very quickly before I go into the outcomes. On my immediate left, we have Mr. Massimo De Luca, who is the Head of Trade and Economics for representing the EU here in South Africa. To his left is Ms. Anna Githuku-Shongwe. Apologies for the pronunciation if it's wrong. She's the Executive Director on the Directorate of Civil... Oh, sorry, no, she is the Head of South African Office UN Women. My apologies. And to her left is Ms. Angeline Simana Paulo, who was on a previous panel. She is Executive Director of the Directorate of Civil Aviation Namibia. So the panel members all have a different perspective. One from the donor perspective, as it were, one from the UN system and in the country office, and one from the Civil Aviation Authority within a member state country. After we have the panel discussion, I'll just go through the action points, because what we want in the end is for clear, concrete deliverables. What are we going to do coming out of this conference? So if I may move on, hopefully this works. Okay, so in terms of the key outcomes, I'm not going to read the slides. I don't want them to be, it's a bit busy. What I'll do is I'll talk some of the points that come out of this. So the first two there, awareness and understanding of this unconscious bias and recognition to shift the mindset. You know, I see from this meeting that one thing is clear. This is everyone's business. Everyone is involved. It's not a UN thing. It's not an industry thing. It's not a member state thing. It's all of us. And we all need to pull together. We're not going to do it unless we get that synergistic. And we just had a presentation on partnerships. So it's really important that we all have buy-in on this. And the other point, I think, is that's come up several times for me is the unconscious bias. And for me, that starts with self-awareness. I see this as something which starts with the individual And then from the individual, it goes through to your office, to the immediate colleagues that you work with, from your office to your organization, from your organization to society, from society to your country. And I would just challenge myself and all of us here to be that agent of change. It's difficult to be a leader, and it's difficult to be an agent of change. And I'm talking to women and men. How do we do that? We must come out of this, I hope, with energy to actually be that person. We're working against a lot of bias in the world, let's be honest. So how do we overcome that? Hopefully we'll come out of this with connections and networks, but with the energy and the belief that we can actually be those individuals that do it. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. Don't think that the country or the society or even your organization is going to do it for you. Start with yourself and do it with your immediate group and go out from there. I don't want to go too much into a personal story, but sort of individual stories can make a difference. So I'm a man, I'm standing up here, okay? And I don't know what assumptions people might make unconsciously about me. So, you know, I have a sort of weird accent, I sound British, I'm half British, but let me just tell you, I'm half Spanish. And what motivates me, why am I here, why do I work in administration and HR throughout my entire career? What has inspired me? It's my mum. My mum was Spanish. She grew up in the Civil War in Spain. And she married my dad who was English. She experienced prejudice from day one. She never went to school. She was the smartest person that I ever knew. And yet, as a child, she was a child laborer. She was the classic girl child. So she had racial discrimination, because in her time, the Spanish spoke with a funny accent and were put down. She never had a formal education and yet was the smartest person. And she is a woman, and she had all of those entrenched issues going back to the 50s and 60s, and even she was born in 32. So she instilled in me what I saw from her, a belief to actually do something about it. As a man, right? So I'm just saying, as a woman, she gave me my moral compass point. And I would also say that, you know, this is also about men. In my experience, a lot of the resistance that you get, that I have seen throughout my career, unfortunately, is from men. So how do you break that down? How do I, as a man, when I'm dealing with recruitment, when I'm dealing with HR issues, when I'm dealing with trying to build that family environment, how do I overcome the barriers that are very deeply embedded amongst men? Not all men are powerful, but quite a few are. And when it comes down to it, when the rubber hits the road, they're the ones that are resisting. Not always men, but usually. So they are part of the conversation, and I've heard a few times that you have to partner with everyone. Please partner with the men, because and make sure that they're not resisting. Not only are they not resisting, they can also be champions of this. There's no reason for this inequality to exist anymore, and it's not an excuse. So please don't forget them, and please make sure that if they're prejudiced, if you see any kind of prejudice, call them out on it. I do it. I just encourage all of you to do it wherever you are in whatever situation you're in. Okay, so moving on to the other points, the importance of sustainable development. You know, as part of the UN, we've got the Goal 5 of the SDGs, and the necessity for data and benchmarking. If I can move on to the next slide. You know, a lot of this is going to be on the need for standardization of data and collection and mechanism for data. So later on you'll see in the action points that ICAO will be making a commitment to be the repository for this information and data coming in, because we've got to have a starting point and we've got to benchmark it. We've got to show progress, and we've got to have accountability for showing progress, all of us collectively. Moving on to the other points, we've got to raise awareness of how culture and stereotypes impact decisions. We've got to advocate, and we've got to dispel those stereotypes. I've talked about stereotypes of people, you know, you can't assume because somebody is a man or a woman, they're from this country, from that culture, that religion. Don't do that. Listen, find out what they believe in, and if they're wrong, be that agent for change. stereotypes are something we can all fall into, but it starts with that self-check, that self-awareness. Next, we talked a lot, there were several sessions actually talking about the education part, so increasing outreach to girls on the STEM. Advocate for aviation in global STEM programs and to urge government to support STEM. So this is what I see as feeding into the pipeline, if you are. You know, it's amazing when I see applications, not just in my current organization, but in the 3 other parts of the UN I've worked in, UNICEF, UNDP, and peacekeeping, the number of women that actually apply for professional level posts in the system as a whole is 25, 30, 33%. It's too low. We need more and you know, that's across the UN system that I've seen. The other thing, remarkably, that I've seen is listening to a lot of organizations, whether they're government, international organizations, private sector, UN, we all seem to be hovering around the 30, 35, 33% of women in professional organization, in professional level jobs and higher. So that's also not good enough, and we all seem to be stuck there. So I see the STEM issue as one of those issues where we can begin to not just chip away at that, but actively start moving that along, because our goal is, I don't think it should be aspirational, our goal should be 50-50. Why not? You know, we're in a growing sector. You know, the Secretary General of ICAO and others have mentioned the growth in traffic in aviation is going to double very soon. So why can't we get those jobs filled by women? You know, it's not as though we're in a decreasing, sort of prosaic sector. We're in a growing sector. We've got to make sure we have an opportunity to fill that gap and make it 50-50, because we're growing. We shouldn't have those new jobs filled by men. So now is the time to do it, because if we don't do it now, when are we ever going to do it, especially in this sector? Okay, so putting measures in place, what we'll be doing is to need to attract and retain women in aviation. A big problem is not just the pipeline of having them apply and having them have the skill sets to work in professional and high-level jobs in the organization, in all of our organizations, but to retain it. Several times it's been mentioned that, you know, every organization depends on its staff, on the quality of its staff. It's kind of a bit of a cliche, but it's a real truism as well, isn't it? All of us rely on the people, on the brains of everyone that we have. And we've got to make sure that we have an enabling environment, not just to encourage women to join, but to retain them, which means we've actively got to address all of those issues that currently make it difficult, that are prejudicial against women, to have them remain within the organization. Because it's all very well giving them the qualifications and the experience and having them join, but then we have these other issues. We talked about maternity leave, we talked about flexible working hours. There are many things that we can do, and we need to do them across the board if we're actually going to be able to address this issue properly and reach our target and our goal. Advocating for leadership and mentoring programs, very important. Again, find champions, not just within women, but within men, so that they're not resisting. And if you have men championing that position and actually walking the walk as well, it all helps, right? It shouldn't be just them not resisting. It should be them joining in and encouraging and not paying lip service to it, because otherwise it becomes something that's a tick-the-box exercise, and that's an attitude that I see prevalent, unfortunately, across many organizations, and we've got to remove that. People roll their eyes, oh, this is just another box-ticking exercise. So a big part of the advocacy and communication for me is to turn that narrative around. It's not about ticking a box, it's about actually doing something about it and showing real results and being accountable for it. So identify what constitutes successful gender partnerships. You know, as I mentioned, we're in a growing sector, and you know, ultimately, I see this as a win-win situation for everybody. I can't see any block for any of us. You know, in terms of the private sector, we all heard that if you have a diverse, integrated workforce, it builds a more profitable organization. It impacts the bottom line favorably. That's the private sector. Government institutions benefit. International organizations like the UN benefit. We all benefit. There's nobody here that won't benefit from actually getting this done. So we should all be motivated and encouraged, because ultimately, we all have the same goal, and we will all benefit for it. But again, it will take all of us to engage, to build those partnerships, to make sure that we really leverage and synergize amongst ourselves, because and do it as an overall sector. Whether we're interested in the bottom line or whether we have other sort of ultimate, we're not about the bottom line as government institutions and UN are not about. It doesn't matter. We're all working towards the same objective. So those are some of the themes and outcomes. I hope I've sort of been able to talk about them a little bit. These slides, of course, will be available after the meeting. I'd now like to invite our distinguished panel to give their views on what they've seen as the major benefits, outcomes, key points, and from a perspective from their individual organizations. And then what I'll do after that is I'll wrap up and summarize the action points that we actually need to come away from this meeting with. So first, thank you very much. First of all, I'll go to Angeline. So Angeline, you work in Namibia. If you could kindly just give us a view of how you see, what you see are the key points coming out of this meeting, and where you see from your institution's point of view the main benefits and also challenges for progressing this forward.
Thank you. Obviously, coming from a country that only attained its independence 18 years ago, with the divide that we have along racial lines, least to mention the gender issues that are still prevailing in our society, and obviously, and also running a civil aviation authority that has this perpetual problem of skills shortages. I see there is a lot of absorptive capacity when you bring private sector, government together in order for them to create a balance of a win-win situation. I think it was not enough stressed here that in order for us to really move the needle much faster, to create the opportunities for women in general, wherever or at whatever level of society they are in the workplace, we need industry and we need government. Government has always been, in my view, the most effective tool to unleash or to unlock investment. Not from the ownership perspective, but just the planning and the controlling part of it. If there are incentives to airlines to invest in women pilots, government wields the purse in the form of tax incentives. You could tell from a tax perspective that for every, Singapore did it, by the way. Singapore, back in its initial transformation as a state, they had to look and find ways of creating jobs. And they knew that foreign direct investment was the most effective way. It doesn't come in the same parcel to each state, depending on the capacity and what you really want to achieve. But they said for the maritime, for every engineer that you will train, give quality education, we would give you a tax bracket to train another one for free. I did not hear that coming out, because unless there are incentives and unless industries, because that's where the energy is, to invest and to train. Government has to create the infrastructure through policies. And the minister stressed it yesterday and the day before yesterday. South Africa has the capacity, they have the policies, and so the government I come from. But the results so far were very paltry. Why? I believe it's because industry doesn't see a win-win in it until they understand that. Now, what Singapore government further did is that they even created in cabinet a seat for trade unions so that they could understand where government was coming from when it decided on a policy directive to ignite or to cultivate or to, let me rather say, to encourage investment in a particular area, whether it was skills, capacity, training, and so on. So I think that has to come out. Or else we will be sitting here 5 years from now and still talking about it. It's just not enough. So there has to be this incentive, and government also has to, industry sometimes, hide figures. They may not want to disclose everything, but the minute that they know there's an incentive for them to open up their balance sheets, show government that for every 10 pilots that you said you needed a particular physical year, I trained 5. And 5 of them came from underrepresented groups, for example. So I think that is the importance, because I always look at a state and the people that it has to lead from a perspective of, we do as consumers take decisions based rationally. And we will only invest when there is a reason or incentive for us to invest. So there is this soul factor where the human man relates to things because there's a personal benefit for him or her. At company level, they are also souls. I look at it as, because they are driven by people, and they also look at the bottom line, my balance sheet, because they have to be financially sustainable, and it's a fierce industry. But this industry has got one huge benefit. It has the capacity to mobilize and move foreign direct investment to our countries. But we must look at our policies and make sure that what is intended to achieve is the desired effect. So, because we talked about first and the second day about intentions. Look at your intentions. Look at which intentions produces what experiences and what is the effect of that. Because you cannot participate in the cause and not participate also in the effect of that. So I think from that perspective, I benefited from a Swedish scholarship. Immediately on Independence Day, on the eve of independence, Namibia, back in 1990, I was fortunately grade 12. Before me, no one else, generations before me, had less choices. They could only become teachers, or they could only become nurses, because that was the infrastructure that was created for us. But on the eve of independence, I could make a decision to do economics, something that I liked. And the Swedish government unlocked scholarships for young engineers. And for every 4 of, I think there was a ratio of 3 for every 3 engineers that the Swedish would pay for. They came to schools in South Africa, Stellenbosch, UTC, because we didn't have the schools on the infrastructure to facilitate that. I benefited 4 or 5 years after that from a scholarship to do a master's at Stellenbosch in transport. So I can only say from that experience that had the same been given to private sector in a form of tax incentives, perhaps we would have produced more engineers in Namibia than the case. I think I will leave it for now, but I think that would be my take.
Thank you so much, Angeline. Actually, that's... opportunities are really important, and if they're not there, that's kind of the start, isn't it? And what I got from you, Angeline, there is not opportunities, it's incentives. What are the incentives? So and Massimo later on, from the UN point of view, and later on from sort of the donor point of view, ICAO has this no country left behind, and UNICEF had the no child left behind. As a UN system, we are dealing with the entire planet. So how within the UN system would you, how can you assist with that incentives part, and to make sure that no person or no state or no institution is left behind, if I can give that to you, Anne? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I bring greetings from Dr. Phumzile, who sent a message this morning to say how sad she is that she's missing this. She really, really enjoyed it, and I couldn't hear the end of all the things that she has planned, and please tell Poppy this, and please tell the minister that, and please tell the other one the other. So I think from UN Women, there's real excitement about this partnership, and to Dr. Liu in particular, thank you for this partnership. But I think in terms of a roadmap, we at UN Women are responsible for a UN, within the UN Global Compact, especially with private sector companies, for what is called the Women Empowerment Principles. And the Women Empowerment Principles have got 7 principles, and this is sector agnostic. And when I listen to all the different sessions that we were talking about, looking at barriers, looking at stereotypes, looking at the workplace, etc., all of them fit into these 7 women empowerment principles. So I'm going to walk through these and just sort of talk about what I see. And I really like Angelina's point about incentives, and they'll fit in perfectly with this. And you can apply this both to the corporate sector and to the public sector, but I think Angelina's covered the public sector quite adequately. The first principle is about ensuring high-level leadership in terms of ensuring gender equality. And I think from the data that we've seen, and when you Google aviation and leadership and gender equality, what you see is a real absence of women in leadership, and I think we've talked about that quite extensively here. And in Dr. Phumzile's presentation, she shared this point about our global program called He for She. And so what we would be wanting to put on the table is for every aviation organization that's based anywhere in the world, for us to partner with you to make sure that your leader, the CEO of the company, the head of that government institution, and especially the male leaders, sign up and become a He for She champion. And what this He for She program is about, and if you just Google heforshe.org, you will see what this is about. It's an initiative where we invite men to join us in solidarity to push for gender equality. And one of the things that we've done is to find male champions, and we've got large global organizations who've signed up as champions for gender equality under this He for She initiative. An example of this is the CEO of McKinsey, the CEO of Barclays, the CEO of Unilever, the CEO of Twitter, the CEO of Schneider Electric. We've got multiple companies. When I look at that list, none of them is from the aviation industry. So we want to have airline companies and big civil aviation companies to have your commitment here. But what that means is that once you take a decision to become a He for She champion, we monitor you on an annual basis. And you make specific commitments. And those commitments are first and foremost about your own leadership. We have a report that we do where we basically track the data and we do a baseline of your institution. And what we found across all these companies is that on average, we have about 11% of women in leadership on average in any of these companies. And yet we'll have about 50 to 60% at the entry level, but they don't move up into the leadership of the organization. And I think you've talked about that here quite extensively. So if we could get a commitment to get your companies actually commit to creating He for She leaders, that's one of the things that we would be able to support you to do and partner with you and see who of you at the next summit will be the lead. Who will have taken and bitten this bullet, taken it and decided that they're going to show their leadership through their actions. Every company leader that makes a commitment here has 3 commitments that they make. One of them would be about changing their leadership. The other one would be about any one of these other principles, and I'll talk about the second one. The second one is about equality and non-discrimination in your workplace. And we talked about the issue of equal pay for work of equal value. That's a straightforward one. I'm so happy to hear Icelandair was here. We love Iceland because, first of all, they've made it illegal to not have equal pay. Or it is illegal to pay women the 34% that somebody put up there on the charts versus men. So equal pay is something that we expect across every one of your companies. The other thing, obviously, is paternity leave, which needs to be basics. For us, this is just basics. We need equality and parity across every one of these civil aviation organizations. The third one is about health and well-being, and under this one, we talk about sexual harassment in the workplace and sexual exploitation in your sector. Now, sexual harassment in the workplace, the figure that Dr. Phumzile quoted here, actually for me is quite astounding. That reports, and unfortunately we don't have enough data from most countries and most regions. We have a lot of data from the US, but we don't have enough from everywhere else. My suspicion is that if this data is coming from the US, we're likely to have worse data from other parts of the world, that they're reporting easily 68% of women in the aviation industry reporting sexual harassment. And I think a lot of this data is coming from flight attendants in particular, who I think experience this both from the workplace, from their bosses, but also from passengers as well. So it's just not a safe environment for women to work with, but you know, this is a job, and so they go ahead and do that job. But the other one is about, and I noticed, I was in the US recently, and I noticed that at airports, in the US, you now actually have monitors, but also signage across the airports about trafficking. We have a case right now in South Africa, and I can't talk about it yet, so I can't name or shame the institution where this was identified, but we have a case that's in court right now where a young woman was found bundled in cargo, preparing to be shipped out of the country. This is one case that was found, and I don't think it's a unique case. So the issue of trafficking across the world, it's a global phenomenon. I'm not even going to point fingers at a particular country or other, but whether it is trafficking in this way or it is trafficking, you know, through the airports. In fact, we want a partnership with airlines so that we can actually begin to train and identify, and I know some airlines are doing this, but it's not consistent enough, so that airports are not, airlines are not facilitating or enabling trafficking of young women and girls across the world. So these are things that become part and parcel of your responsibility. And it's not just the responsibility of UN agencies or the organization that's responsible for gender-based violence in your country. The fourth one is about promoting training, and I think you've talked extensively about that. And I want to suggest that we expand the term STEM to STEMA, so that we have science, technology, mathematics, and aviation. So that if we start talking very specifically about training women, young women in aviation, very, very specifically, we will begin to change this story. And stop the biases. You know, recently we had a plane crash. I'm from Kenya, and there was a plane crash of a small airline in the Aberdare Mountains, and both pilots were young women. But these are young women who have had an incredible track record. And there was a lot of controversy about whether or not, because they were women, or this accident was caused because of an accident. Now, you know, there's a lot of controversy still around this, but I think there is enough that this debate about are women safe to fly planes or women safe in the aviation industry at all, and just put that behind us, because this is just what unconscious bias does when we're so few of us. So STEMA is about enterprise and supply chain, and I didn't hear any mention of it here. Globally, only 1% of procurement of goods and services are procured from women-owned businesses. Only 1%. And yet anywhere between 25 and 30% of GDP of countries come from procurement, both public and private sector procurement. So it is shocking, and I don't know if we were to do of the aviation, how much do you invest in women-led enterprises in this, to bring into this industry, if across all the different areas that you talked about, whether it's transport or logistics or travel agencies or whatever it might be, if we were buying from women, we would be able to change the trajectory and the economy and the attraction that we can bring in more women into this industry. So if we can really pay attention and change this number, but begin with a baseline. How are we doing in this industry in terms of buying from women? And then begin to move that, because ultimately we want that 50%. The 30% is not even, we can't even talk about 30%, because 1% is what we talk about. It is really an indictment, I think, on every one of us. The sixth one is about community initiatives and how we invest in the communities where we serve and so on. I think that's something that many different companies and organizations do, and I saw some examples up on the table. And then the seventh one is about measuring and tracking. And as I said, for me, when we started thinking about this summit and we started trying to do our research and trying to identify what do we know about this, we actually couldn't find enough data. And so the issue of being able to measure and track and really building a strong database about this industry in its comprehensive way, and in terms of gender equality measures, is something that for us is a big priority, and we have the tools, we have the different programs, whether it's gender seals or different types of tools that we have across the UN. We've got lots and lots and lots of tools that we can use that we already work with government and the private sector. And I'll stop there, but I think this is a framework for me that is easy to use as a guide for how we track how it is we're doing. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Anne. That was excellent. And you'll see actually in the action points where we're addressing some of those issues for concrete action, which is very important to come out of this meeting. So Massimo, building on that, building on the needs of no country left behind, and building on those 7 principles that Anne talked about, is there, what would you like to add from an EU perspective, given that the EU is obviously one of the sort of generous donors and has a big part to play within this whole issue? Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Vincent. It's a pleasure to be here. And let me say, I come from a part of the European Union which is focusing on trade and investment. And I was really pleased to hear from Anne references to a wider sense of opportunity that we should really keep in mind. And that I think this wider sense of opportunity, which really covers the industry upstream and downstream, that's very much, I think, a part of what we as European Union are trying to support in terms of women involvement in order to make this promise a reality. I think that what I got from this Congress is, yes, indeed, a sense of opportunity, a sense of an industry which is growing. I would say, I don't want to be negative, but the experience in the European Union testifies that opportunity as such is not going to make the change, to cause the change. In the European Union, in a way, we are endowed with a very high level of social protection, and with a lot of access to education, to economic opportunities. But this has not generated in this specific industry a very high level of participation by women. So especially as you have heard during these 3 days, even in the European Union, the level of participation of women in, for example, in the pilot profession doesn't go beyond 5-6%. And that begs the question of what can be done better. In that respect, I must say, we are very happy to partner also with the UN Women on a number of issues. We fully subscribe to the vision and the concrete actions that they are pursuing. We also heard today a lot about partnerships, and this is something we as European Union, we really put an emphasis. And even it was already mentioned by Anna. You see on Anna in the panel just before ours, You may see slides on a screen, but I mean, you will receive it's not for today really to go through those slides. You will receive the presentation separately as part of the materials. But the platform for change that has already been mentioned really responds to a need to have a broad-based approach to the issue of women involvement in this particular industry. Let me say that what we have achieved so far is still a work in progress, because the partnership for change in the aviation industry, for the time being, involves a number of sector associations from the employers and employees side, industry representatives, and member states. Now, what it does is very similar to what Anne explained before, to generate voluntary commitment, voluntary participation around principles, but also around action points. The voluntary side of the partnership, I think, is very important, meaning that insofar as we need action top-down in terms of policy setting, we need a lot of bottom-up approach. Vincent, before you said really it's an individual commitment, and from individuals that has to spread into the CSOs, I mean the civil society organizations we belong to. And this has to be taken as a commitment at all levels. This is what we try to support at European level. And concretely, that results into a bit of policing, if I may, because once you are part of the system, then you need to also to identify where are you going to operate. So, for example, issues like the vacancy drafting, the conditions, the work conditions, whether they are neutral or whether they really cater for the specific needs of which are linked to gender. A commitment about full application and reporting in terms of specific legislation that we already have in the European Union, because I mean, there's no lack of legislation, I think, as such, okay? Equal pay, work conditions, but there is not so much leadership and commitment to really implement it effectively and making it really something which is binding in terms of management processes, okay? So this is the space where we are really pushing through the platform for change that is covered by the presentation that you will receive, which is headed by the DG, the Director General for Transport in the European Union. Now, apart from opportunity and systems like the platform for change and in an environment where policy does its part and so forth, then there's also a need of tools beyond the systems, meaning support. We heard about incentives. You were asking me what do we do in terms of really fostering action, on a wider scale through even through our funding. Okay. European Union is a donor. I mean, it's of course also a policy sector, so we are privileged in that respect. Gender is a big component of our donor activities. I mean, this is what we pursue also together very often in partnership with the UN Women. And this is done in a number of ways. In terms of supply chain, really, whether it is skills or SME support, even just talking about South Africa and Southern Africa, and I'm happy that we have a Namibian representative here, because Namibia also has the chair of SADC for this year, and I think they can also play a role in that respect. But we do cater for the whole value chain, let's say, around women empowerment. More specifically, we also have projects on gender. Now, and this is also a discussion where I would like even aviation to play a role, because I think that the tools are there, but there's also a need through also our partners to understand whether the tools, whether call for proposals that we use for projects, for example, whether the technical assistance that we put at our disposal, they really go in the right direction and whether they really hit the goals. In the past, I think that there's no lack of things that we've done, the things that are in the pipeline. Probably also part of the effort that we should, bring together in the context of the aviation is really to look at that as part of our monitoring exercise to say, okay, does the support, the concrete support from public donor initiative and from private sector through the compact activities and so forth, do they go in the right direction? And this is something where really the European Union, we are ready to play our part. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. If we could have the previous presentation back, please, so I can conclude with the action points. So thank you very much to Angeline, Anne, and Massimo. So what we hear there is some different perspectives from different elements, but there are different linkages, aren't there? So Angeline talked about the skill shortage and how governments can be a very effective tool for change, but there needs to be help with the incentives. And then when Anne talked about the 7 principles, particularly the championing for the he for she and the need for leadership and concrete leadership, very important. And then Massimo talking about then the voluntary partnerships, the top down, the bottom up, meeting in the middle, involving individuals, society, organizations, ultimately member states. And another good takeaway for me there is that you can have all the policies and the rules in place, but unless you actually collect the data, you have clear action points, and you make people accountable for implementation, then all the rules and the policies lose their effectiveness or not as effective as they should be. So with that, I will go through the roadmap for action. This is very important. I would just say at the end of this, we will be having the last meeting, last presentation rather, and there will be a communique that will come out today, so we'll be doing that. But before that, let me just go through the roadmap for enhancing gender equality in aviation. I'm going to break every rule of PowerPoint presentations and actually read these, because I think the wording here is important, so please bear with me. So what is the roadmap? What are we going to do? What are we coming out of this meeting with? Well, considering the ICAO Assembly A39, the last assembly we had in 2016, 30, that called on all states and industry stakeholders to take concrete actions to accelerate the progress for gender equality in the aviation sector. Fine. On that, we're also considering the stakeholders to contribute to the United Nations 2030 agenda for the Sustainable Development Goals. Number 5 being on gender, but there are 17 overall. And taking into account the highlights of the Global Aviation Summit held in Cape Town, this meeting here, what are we going to do? Well, the following strategic action points are recommended now for consideration by states and industry stakeholders in developing tailored programs and roadmaps to enhance gender equality and the advancement of women in aviation. And we're dividing it into 4 categories. Policy and action plan. Let me take that one first. So as far as policy and action plan is concerned, we're going to develop, for the government legislation and the organizational policies, we're going to enhance those. So in order to ensure women are treated equally and fairly as a policy, and to address matters such as pay equality, maternity, paternity leave, work-life balance, flexible working arrangement, development of mentoring and leadership programs, violence against women, etc. That's not a complete list, but that is an example of some of the major issues that will be addressed from a policy perspective. Secondly, to advocate and demonstrate commitment from the top of our organizations, and that's where the he for she comes in, and that's where the commitment of all the CEOs and heads of organizations come in. Very important that we have that engagement. Secondly, there are the barriers and enablers. So point 1, to eliminate or mitigate biases and stereotypes in the home, school and workplace in an effort to increase access to girls for STEM or STEMmer education, leading to an increase in the talent pool for women. Secondly, to promote leadership training to mid-level managers in order to prepare them for senior management positions. Within a lot of organizations, you see, we saw that in the support level staff, you have sometimes almost 50-50 representation, but as you go up through the leadership, through the seniority of organizations, that tends to tail off. So we need to promote that leadership from middle to upper, and actually I think also from lower to middle, throughout the whole career path there. Thirdly, fostering a coaching and mentoring environment with a gender lens. And fourthly, sharing gender-related best practices. And I would go back to my point before. That's not just, that's individual, group, organization, society, and state. That's at all levels. What about data? How can we measure this? It's very important that we actually, in terms of our accountability, have data and have benchmarking. So, ICAO and its member states, together with international aviation partners, will work together to collect, analyze, and transparently share global gender disaggregated data on a voluntary basis that would include goals and targets. Very key. And I would hope and expect, actually, that that data in subsequent meetings going forward will be shown. We need to be able to track this. Secondly, that the data will be used for accurate policy decision-making, driving effective implementation of gender equality actions in the aviation sector. Then partnerships. We had a good panel discussions on the last panel discussion, but also throughout the 3 days here. Very important that we link and leverage each other's expertise and also the momentum. So, in terms of partnerships, accelerate gender equality in aviation through partnerships with stakeholders, all stakeholders, sharing a common vision and goals on gender. Again, going back to the win-win situation. Secondly, for the aviation sector, in collaboration with UN Women, ICAO will promote the He for She campaign and introduce a UN system-wide action plan on gender equality and the empowerment of women. That's our acronym is UN SWAP, at the country level in selected states. And secondly, in partnerships, we will be establishing, ICAO, partnerships with UNESCO on education and STEM or STEMmer, and with industry for scholarships, fellowships, and internship opportunities for girls. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you. So that concludes our wrap-up meeting. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much to Vincent Smith from ICAO, as well as the final panel today for their contributions to the roadmap. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't need to repeat the points that have been made. They were very clearly presented to you up on the screen. Thank you, Vincent. But on the screens to my left and to my right. And at this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, we are now, and this final panel is standing between you, I, lunch, as well as our various departures home. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can please call up to the stage at this time the Deputy Minister of Transport. Please, if my final speakers, I'd like to call you up to the stage to sit, and then they will do their closing remarks from the stage. So if I can call up the Deputy Minister of Transport, the Secretary General of ICAO, the Acting Director General for the Department of Transport, Mr. Hlabisa, you are here. Thank you very much. And if I can call up my final speakers to the stage, technical team, if you can please just assist me with making sure that my three final speakers can be heard from the stage. Thank you very much to our final speakers for our closing remarks of this program who have joined me on stage this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, you will no doubt agree that we have had such a fulfilling 3 days together. It has been, for myself, certainly, an absolute pleasure to be your moderator, masters of ceremonies, timekeeper, as well as regulator of all conversations, both on and off the runway and the field here. My name is Lynette Nduli, and I have had some great conversations, a whole lot of fun, and I'm feeling both invigorated and energized by what the aviation industry is not only going to do for itself, but also what it is going to do for the conversation for women, and particularly the girl child, as they begin to discover not only themselves, but also the careers that they wish to have into the future. The last and final words will not come from me this afternoon, but only to give you instructions to say that after our closing remarks, we will all join in song in the national anthem and then proceed to lunch. Thank you very much to everybody who has joined the conversation from right the way around the world, those who have been on our live streams, those who have joined us on social media and made contributions related to questions, comments, as well as some of the insights that they have from their lived experiences of working in the aviation industry during this time. We appreciate all of it. To those of you who have asked me for presentations and whether some of them will be loaded, I do encourage you to please directly contact the ICAO office and Glenda Newton specifically. You saw her on stage twice yesterday, and I do ask her that if you've got specific presentations that you require, to please go and discuss same with her, and she will assist you where she can. And then if there are any further questions, the ICAO team does remain on hand to assist you with those. Thank you very much again. I will now hand over to make her closing remarks first to you, Secretary General. We've been asked if I can ask you, Secretary General, up, and then the Acting Director General, and then the Deputy Minister to read the final communique. Closing remarks first. Okay. If I can then ask our Acting Director General from the Department of Transport, Mr. Christopher Hlabisa, to take his place at the lectern. The microphone, sir, is up and on for you, and if you can please give us your closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Ms. Lynette, thank you very much for affording me this opportunity to address your audience. Thank you very much. To the Honorable Deputy Minister of Transport, thank you very much for affording us this opportunity. Acknowledgements also goes to our Secretary General of ICAO, Dr. Fang Liu, and all protocols observed. Ladies and gentlemen, I guess one will not be totally wrong in assuming that many of you have flights to catch this afternoon, and we are therefore banking on this summit finishing on the right time. I believe that you were supposed to finish at 1 o'clock. Now time is almost there, so I think we are almost there. We are almost there. It is for that reason that I will stick to my assignment, which is to express the gratitudes of all of us for a very successful summit that we had here in Cape Town. In this regard, I wish to start by conveying words of appreciation to the head of the South African Civil Aviation Authority, Ms. Poppy Khoza, for identifying a need and sharing her thoughts with the Secretary General, Dr. Fang Liu, about the need to start the conversation about gender inclusivity and the need to change the status quo in the aviation sector. Similarly, we have to thank Dr. Liu for acknowledging that gender transformation was not, in essence, a challenge that is affecting South Africa only, and for her desire to see change across many parts of the world. Similarly, words of gratitude are extended to my principals, the Minister of Transport, Mr. Nzimande, Dr. Nzimande, as well as the Deputy Minister of Transport, Ms. Cindy Siwe Chikunga, for their support behind this initiative of this summit. We must also commend the Board of South African Civil Aviation Authority, led by my colleague seated over there, Mr. Mkwena, for giving his management team the support and latitude to organize an event of this magnitude. I also wish to thank the ICAO team for tapping into their knowledge reserve to help identify the right topics and the most relevant people across the globe to discuss this important subject, the gender equality in aviation. We all know that it's a very stubborn sector in transport where it's male-dominated. So I think through this initiative, we have got no doubt that we are going to break these barriers once and for all. A little bird told me that there were lengthy discussions between South Africa and ICAO organizing team, and that there were long lists of topics and aspects to be considered. You would agree with me that the finalists were indeed impressive. That is why we've got this product at this point in time. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I would like to thank all the speakers and the panelists that shared their valuable inputs with us. I also wish to thank all the sponsors whose contribution has made this event a success. Let's also commend the United Nations agencies that collaborated with us in making this event a success. I'm referring here especially the UNESCO and the United Nations Women, whose executive director is our country's former deputy president, Ms. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. Our gratitude is also extended to the various organizations, particularly the non-profit organizations that are doing tremendous work on the ground to ensure that our girl child is equipped with the knowledge and confidence to remember that they also can become pioneers in the aviation sector. Lastly, I want to thank our very capable Lynette Ntuli for her outstanding work to program direct and the professionalism she has displayed in the last 4 days we've been here. The sense of humor, the knowledge of the subject, and putting things together. And she has been a very good timekeeper and making sure that everyone is talking sense. Let's give you a round of applause once again. As we return to our respective homes and destinations, let us be reminded that this session was the planting of a seed or simply building a foundation. The actual work of nurturing the ideas we shared into a formidable trees that will bear fruit for generations to come and must start today. And the hard work of putting the structure of the foundation lies ahead, but must start now. We cannot procrastinate it any further. As a country, we are grateful that ICAO gave us the latitude and opportunity to initiate and host this summit. Our wish is for the conversation to continue, and hence we would like to officially hand over this project to ICAO and hope that resources within the ICAO structures will be allocated to this project, and that timeframes will be set aside to regularly meet in order to monitor progress against set targets. That is our wish, so that it mustn't be a talk show. We need to implement this decision that we have taken here, so that when we go out, we change the world for the better in the aviation sector. This is because we are of the view that the conversation does not end here and now, but it begins here today together with the associated work. Ladies and gentlemen, I trust that your experience since touching down in South Africa has been a pleasant one, and it will continue occupying your minds and your hearts. When you take off after our deliberations here in Cape Town, I hope that you will not only be taking home a to-do list, but also beautiful and delightful memories to share with those that unfortunately were not able to be with us here in this summit. Most critically, I hope you would take what we call here in South Africa, Mzansi City, ipadkos. In other words, we are saying it's a food that you carry along with yourself so that you don't starve on your way to your various destinations. So we call it padkos here in South Africa. So I hope that you'll do so that you don't starve on your way to your respective destinations. There was plenty of food for thought, and my wish is for you to take home some of these key quotes that resounded with yourselves. Some of the remarkable ones which I want to quote, they are just 7, but quite a number of them. I had to cut them, but I had to just stick to the 7 that I thought were really outstanding. But every information that we got and input was really, really, really good. But I just want to start with one that says, nothing can stop an idea whose time has come. That is what we are saying. This Global Aviation Summit on Gender Parity, it has come. No one in any part of this world will stop this one. Let's give it a round of applause for that one. And when the whole world is silent, even one voice becomes powerful. I'm reminded of a chicken in the village. When it lays one single egg, the whole village will know that the chicken has laid an egg. But when a whale has laid millions and billions of the little ones, no one will know. You will only see the school of fish swimming across. We must never be like a whale that lays multitudes of eggs and little ones of school fish, but nothing happens. No one will know about that. Let us be a chicken in the village. I think that is what it says here. So the aviation sector will continue being the chicken in the village in such a manner that the whole world will take cognizance and take notice of what is happening in this sector. The challenges of a female aviator in Chile is a replica of the challenges faced by the female pilot in China. The pain felt by a female aviator in Vienna is the same pain felt by the one based in Venda. And that cannot continue unchallenged. We must challenge these inequalities. It always seems impossible until it is done. So said one of our greatest icons in South Africa and also the icon of the world. It takes just a very small spark from a single matchstick to start a raging fire. Once at the top, it must be second nature for all of us who have made it to the rooftop to hold the ladder tight, to take it easier to the next generation of women aviation to climb up with hassle-free. We would not like to see this stubborn aviation sector dominated by male to perpetuate in the years to come. So women must come and take a center stage here so that we transform this aviation globally for the better, for the upliftment of our women in the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the Acting Director General of the Department of Transport in South Africa, Mr. Christopher Hlabisa. If I can then call our next speaker to the stage, the Secretary General of ICAO, Dr. Fang Liu. You've seen her behind the mic a few times during the course of this conference, and thank you to her.
Honorable Deputy Minister of Transport, dear friends, colleagues, good afternoon. Having now reached the end of our program, I think we can all agree on what an impressive 2.5 days this has been. Truly, this has been a unique event. As I mentioned in the opening, this is the first time that the global aviation industry community has gathered to deliberate on gender equality in aviation. And let us not forget as well that this summit was the very first cross-sectoral global gathering where the aviation community and gender experts from other horizons have jointly explored barriers and lessons learned in order to provide women with more equal opportunities to enter into and then advance in their aviation careers. To achieve this goal, different sectors need to strategize and work together throughout the life cycle of individuals, from early childhood through adolescence, and thereafter as an adult entering the aviation workforce and building their career in aviation. Our focus has been to foster greater access, opportunity, and a level playing field for girls and women, whether in the home environment, their schools, or in the workplace, in order to accelerate gender balance. And of course, we expect to see access, opportunities, and support for both women and men. This is our ultimate goal. This importance of looking at gender from the life cycle approach has been illustrated throughout this summit. A total of 500 participants have contributed to its success. In addition, over 2,000 global viewers on YouTube streaming have followed our discussions throughout the summit. This is remarkable. Clearly, time is now for all of us, together as a global aviation community, to accelerate and take action. In the final session, we have just reviewed some highlights and main takeaways from the summit, as well as a list of recommended actions which can be taken by governments, airline and airport industries, aviation manufacturers, and other aviation industry stakeholders and partners. I urge all of you to seriously consider these and to do a commitment which has been demonstrated throughout this entire event. I would also encourage industry and international organizations to also cooperate with governments to pursue this noble cause. Please continue to feel the momentum, and please also remember that none of us are alone. We are a large community, and as you know, there is strength in numbers. I firmly believe that it is through collaboration and partnerships that we can really accelerate progress, and the challenge I do extend to each of you now is to be more innovative in your approach to gender by teaming up with a partner. I'm a firm believer in the value of partnerships, something which has been on clear display in the collaboration we've seen at this summit among SACA, UNESCO, UN Women, IWAF, ACI, IATA, and other aviation international partners. Together, we can do it. In closing now, I would like to thank the valuable contributions of the summit's moderators, speakers, and participants. And I would also like to thank all the sponsors for their support. Without your contributions, we would not be here. I would also like to thank South Africa government, South Africa Civil Aviation Authorities, South Africa Ministry of Transport, in particular, Deputy Minister of Transport and Director Civil Aviation Authority and Chairman of the CAA Board. Our closest hosts for showing such tremendous gender leadership and agreeing to host this summit and its various events. Your excellent organization and generous hospitality are appreciated highly by each and every participant. Without your leadership, this event would not have been possible. It's my great hope that we have all been inspired here in Cape Town these past few days, and I hope to see that inspiration bearing fruit in the months ahead as put our gender commitments and innovations into action. With that, dear friends and colleagues, I wish you all safe journeys home. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Secretary General of ICAO for her warm closing remarks and support and continued commitment to the cause of gender equality in the aviation sector. And then our final speaker of today, the Deputy Minister of Transport in South Africa, the Honorable Ms. Chikunga, who will also read out the communique that has come as a result of what we have been deliberating about at the Global Aviation Gender Summit. Please give her a warm round of applause.
Program Director, our Secretary General, Dr. Fang Liu, Department of Transport Acting Director General, Mr. Chris Labisa. I hereby present to you, our esteemed guests, the communique that ICAO will post together with the news release at ICAO website. South Africa's Ministry of Transport will also disseminate the communique to our media houses as well as our website. It reads as follows. A joint initiative by South African Civil Aviation Authority and the International Civil Aviation Organization, the inaugural Global Aviation Gender Summit was hosted by SACA, supported by the Government of the Republic of South Africa through the Department of Transport from the 8th to the 10th of August 2018 in Cape Town, South Africa. The summit was co-organized by SACA and ICAO in collaboration with United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, and UN Women. The summit was attended by over 500 participants representing ICAO member states, airports, air navigation service providers, airlines, international organizations, educational institutions, aviation-related professional associations, and industry stakeholders. In addition, over 2,000 global viewers on YouTube live stream have followed our discussions throughout the summit. Bearing in mind the global agenda for sustainable development launched by the United Nations in 2015, including Sustainable Development Goal number 5 on gender equality and empowerment of women, as well as the following interrelated ICAO Assembly resolution adopted in 2016, Resolution A3930, ICAO Gender Equality Program, promoting the participation of women in the global aviation sector, Resolution A3929, Next Generation of Aviation Professionals, and Resolution A3925, Aviation's Contribution Towards the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The Global Aviation Gender Summit participants came together to advocate for gender equality in the global aviation sector and to better understand the gender divide in a highly specialized field of work by urging states and the aviation industry to demonstrate strong, determined leadership and commitment to gender equality in aviation and to work together with a view to making further progress. Mobilizing the global aviation community to discuss existing barriers for gender equality in aviation and to share best practices, programs, and initiatives aimed at overcoming these barriers, and identifying concrete actions which can be taken to accelerate gender equality in aviation and promoting partnerships amongst interested stakeholders to implement these actions. Mindful of these points, the Global Aviation Gender Summit participants, 1, highlighted the Agency for Global Collection, Analysis and Sharing of Gender disaggregated data to inform policymakers and to drive action on gender-related policies and programs in aviation. Examined how culture, stereotypes, and biases impact decisions related to gender and aviation at home, in schools, and in the workplace, and underscored the need to take measures to eliminate or mitigate against this. Encourage states and the aviation industry to enhance the promotion of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM education for girls as a means of increasing girls' access to STEM education. Identified the need to optimize the use of internships, fellowships, bursaries, and other similar programs to further opportunities for skills development for women in aviation at the national and international level through collaboration amongst ICAO, states, international organizations, and aviation industry partners. Recognize the need for the development of gender-responsive government legislation, such as pay equity, parental leave, violence against women, etc. Promoted the development of organizational and workplace policies aimed to create enabling work environments for women in aviation, such as flexible working arrangements. Advocated for leadership and mentoring programs and initiatives to support women in their career development and access to senior levels positions. Emphasized the urgent need to accelerate gender equality in aviation through partnerships with stakeholders, sharing a common vision and goals on gender. Recognize that diversity and increased female involvement in research and technology will enhance the innovation capacity of organizations. Welcomed the opportunity for ICAO to collaborate with UNESCO in education and STEM to foster the development of a future talent pool of women in aviation. Welcomed the opportunity for ICAO to collaborate with UN Women to promote the He for She campaign and to explore the feasibility of introducing the UN system-wide action plan on gender equality and the empowerment of women to include national targets at the country level in select states as a pilot project. Reaffirmed the need for ongoing dialogue, monitor progress, share best practices in order to continue to build on progress to date and to further accelerate gender equality and the empowerment of women in the aviation sector. And concluded that the endorsement of the roadmap by the ICAO Assembly would advance the implementation of Assembly Resolution A3930 and globally accelerate gender equality and the empowerment of women in the aviation sector. Ladies and gentlemen, I shall now request that we all rise for the singing of the Republic of South Africa's national anthem.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed my honor and privilege to now declare this Global Aviation Gender Summit held in Cape Town, South Africa, from the 8th to the 10th of August 2018, officially closed. Bon voyage. I thank you.
Well done. Ladies and gentlemen, the last sessions, the roadmap presentation, as well as the official communique will be uploaded on the app for each of you to read and take home. Thank you.